Have you ever wondered why a woman can cry in your arms, tell you she's scared to lose you, say she's never felt this way before, and then, just weeks later, she's cold, distant, and gone? You replay everything. You search for the switch. You ask yourself if it was something you did, something you missed. You dig for a moment, any moment when she changed, but you don't find one, because it didn't happen overnight. It started way earlier. She noticed something long before you did. That's the part no one tells you. That's the part most men only realize when it's already over. You thought things were fine because she wasn't yelling, she wasn't slamming doors, she wasn't cheating. But that silence, that eerie calm, was never peace. It was retreat. She had already started to disconnect, already decided to stop fighting, already made her emotional exit while you were still holding on to a fantasy. And here's the part that should shake you while you were giving more, investing deeper. She was observing, quietly, judging, making mental notes you never saw, measuring your behavior not by what you gave, but by what you lacked emotional command, boundaries, unpredictability, distance. The things you thought would ruin the connection were, in her mind, the things that might have saved it. This is the trap most good men fall into. You believe consistency and availability are the key to her security. You think that loving her harder will stop her from slipping away. You don't realize that the more emotionally available you become, the more exposed your weakness looks to her. You give her all your presence, all your softness, all your plans, and she starts to feel nothing. Not because you did anything wrong, but because the part of her that responds to emotional polarity needs friction, needs distance, needs to wonder. And once she no longer has to wonder, she stops feeling. She tells herself she needs safety, but when you give it to her in full, it becomes suffocating. She tells herself she wants a man who opens up, but when you do, she loses the desire to earn it. She needs to chase, not just be handed everything on a silver platter, because the truth is brutal. She wants to feel chosen, but only by a man who could walk away, not one who kneels. This is not about playing games. This is about the subconscious psychology she doesn't even understand herself. If she has to explain why she's pulling back, she'll say she's just stressed, or busy, or unsure. But what's really happening is far deeper. She has lost attraction because she no longer feels your edge. She no longer feels your self-control. You became emotionally obedient, predictable, available on demand. You made her the center of your world, and in doing so, you lost your own. Most women notice this shift early. They don't always act on it, but they feel it. It might be the way you start asking for reassurance more often. The way you pause before answering her texts, trying to say the right thing. The way you hesitate when she tests you, trying not to upset her. She sees the moment you stop leading and start chasing, and from that moment on, her respect begins to erode, quietly, invisibly, until it's too late. And you're blind to it, because you're emotionally invested, because you think love is something you earn by loyalty, because you still believe that if you just keep showing up, she'll see how good you are. But good isn't what she's searching for when her instincts are activated. She's searching for strength, and strength doesn't beg. Strength doesn't over-explain. Strength doesn't collapse in front of her emotional shifts. It holds its ground. It commands space. It walks away when it's no longer being met. But no one teaches you that. You were told to be the good guy, to be open, honest, emotionally fluent, to talk it through, to stay calm, to listen. You followed all the rules they gave you, but you didn't realize they gave you rules that work after attraction, not before. They gave you advice to maintain a relationship, not to keep respect. And the moment you follow that advice too early, too easily, too eagerly, she notices. She notices when you stop being a challenge. She notices when you put her on a pedestal. She notices when your world shrinks around her attention. And she might smile. She might say thank you. She might even tell you she appreciates you. But inside, something dies. And you won't know it until the calls slow down. The texts go unanswered. The affection goes cold, and she's telling you she needs space. Telling you she's confused. Telling you, I just need time to figure things out. And you'll sit there, stunned, because you never saw it coming. But she did. She saw it from the moment you stopped being someone she could lose and became someone she owned. You probably didn't even realize it when it started. It wasn't a single moment, a dramatic betrayal, or a cruel rejection. It was subtle. It was the way she stopped looking at you the same way when you tried to express how much she meant to you. The way her compliments felt flatter, her responses colder, her interest more mechanical. And yet, you still believed you were building something real. You doubled down. You opened up more. You gave her all the validation she needed to feel emotionally fed, but you starved yourself in the process. She pulled back, and you leaned in. She grew quiet, and you filled the silence. You tried harder, reached further, made yourself more available, more agreeable, more digestible until you weren't even a man anymore. You were a mirror reflecting her moods, and that's when she started emotionally detaching. Because here's what they don't tell you: women want to feel you. Not your feelings, your presence, your direction, your unwillingness to be shaken by her waves. But you gave her a sponge instead. You absorbed her pain. You managed her emotional weather. You tried to be the shelter, but the more you did that, the more she saw you as something beneath her storms, something she could toss aside once the skies cleared. And it's not because she's heartless. It's because you taught her, through your behavior, that your value was measured by how much of her you could handle, not by how much of yourself you could protect. You were patient, calm, and emotionally mature, but inside, you were breaking. You just didn't let it show. You let your needs slide. You made excuses for her distance. You rationalized her coldness. You thought, she's just tired. Or maybe she's overwhelmed. Or I'll wait until she's ready. But here's the reality: she was already making a mental exit. She was already imagining life without you. She was already reevaluating her options, and the worst part, you enabled it. Because when she pulled back, you didn't create distance. You compensated. You tried to win her back with affection, when what she really needed was to feel your absence, your line, your refusal to be taken for granted. But you never gave her that. You gave her devotion, obedience, warmth, and she gave you silence. Now let's be clear, not every woman plays this game consciously. Most don't. Most women aren't cruel. They're responding to their own instinctive programming. Their nervous system responds to emotional tension, to male polarity, to unpredictability and direction. That doesn't mean being toxic. It means being solid, unmoved, not reactive to her moods, not constantly explaining, not asking permission to take up space. But you became exactly that, a man who explained himself too much, a man who needed her clarity to feel centered, a man who put the weight of his self-worth in her hands and called it emotional honesty. And she noticed, long before the breakup, long before the we need to talk, long before the tears or the ghosting or the new guy, she noticed. She just didn't tell you because it's not her job to teach you how to be a man. She won't train you. She won't explain to you what she's feeling. She'll just slowly lose respect. And once respect is gone, attraction isn't far behind. And then comes the confusion, the desperation, the panic. You try to recover it. You try to say the right thing, do the right thing, get her back. You think if you can just explain what happened, she'll understand. But she doesn't want to understand. She wants to feel. and feelings can't be reasoned with. You're speaking logic to a woman who made her decision with her gut 6 weeks ago. You just didn't see it. Because men always notice too late. You think things are fine until they're not. You think the relationship is working until it crumbles. You don't see the slow erosion because you were never taught to read her patterns. You thought as long as you didn't cheat, didn't scream, didn't hurt her, you were a good man. And maybe you were. But being a good man is not the same as being a wanted man. And you have to ask yourself, what good is your virtue if it never commands value? Somewhere along the line, you lost your gravity, and she felt it, and she adjusted, not with malice, not with cruelty, but with instinct. She started turning off parts of herself, started pulling away sexually, started getting shorter with you, colder, less responsive. And you waited, you tolerated, you held out hope, and all that time, she was building the emotional foundation for her exit, not out of nowhere, not in a moment, but in 1,000 micro decisions you didn't notice, and that's the point. She notices early, you notice too late. By the time you realize what's happening, it's already done. She's already halfway out the door. You're just hearing the echo of her last step. You keep asking yourself, what could I have done differently? But deep down, you already know. You knew it when you ignored that first feeling of imbalance. When you noticed she stopped texting first, when her voice changed on the phone, when her touch felt obligatory. You noticed it, but you buried it. You told yourself not to be insecure. You told yourself not to overthink, because you were taught to believe that doubting her meant doubting love. So you suppressed your instincts, you ignored your gut, and you replaced it with hope. That hope, that's what blinds you. That's what keeps you in the trap. The belief that if you just give it more time, more patience, more love, she'll come back around. You don't realize that the very act of waiting, of proving yourself, is the thing pushing her further away. She's not watching your devotion. She's watching your self-abandonment. And that's what kills her respect. Because no woman stays attracted to a man who disappears just to keep her close. She might enjoy the attention. She might enjoy the comfort. But she won't crave him. And craving is what sustains desire. She wants to feel your strength, not hear about your feelings. She wants to know you want her, but not that you need her. Once she becomes your emotional center, she starts looking for the exit. Because on a primal level, a man who cannot hold his own frame cannot hold hers either. You think love is enough, but it isn't. She doesn't leave because you didn't love her. She leaves because you stopped being someone she could respect. And that's what hurts the most, not that she's gone, but that she left while you were still giving her everything. You thought you were being the man she needed, but what you were actually doing was stepping out of your masculine core to serve her emotional state. And the moment you did that, you became the emotional follower. She led, and you followed, and she might never say it out loud. But a woman doesn't want to lead in a relationship. She might test, she might challenge, but deep down, she wants to feel your certainty, your command. She wants to feel that if she pushes, you won't collapse, but you collapsed. Quietly, slowly, in all the small ways that don't seem like surrender until you look back and realize you were no longer standing tall. You were bending, apologizing, explaining, waiting, hoping. And she saw it, she felt it, she resented it, because it reminded her that she was in control, and no woman stays attracted to a man she controls. And so the shift happened. Gradually, she became colder, sharper, less engaged. Not to punish you, but because her body no longer responded. Her heart no longer raced. She didn't fantasize anymore. She didn't look forward to your messages. You became part of her routine, predictable, familiar, and in her mind, no longer worth the emotional energy to fight for. Meanwhile, you still thought you had time. You still thought the relationship could be saved. So you planned dates. You sent long texts. You asked if she was okay. You wrote messages at 1 a.m. trying to explain how much she meant to you. And in your head, that was love. That was effort. But to her, it was noise. Emotional noise from a man who no longer held weight. By the time you realized she was gone emotionally, if not physically, you were already chasing a ghost. She had already detached. And now, you're left with the memories, the confusion, the rage. You tell yourself you were good to her, and maybe you were. But that doesn't matter anymore, because being good isn't the same as being chosen. And she stopped choosing you a long time ago. You just didn't notice. Not until she started talking to someone new. Or until she posted that cold caption. Or until you saw that blank expression when you tried to reach her. And suddenly, it hit you. All at once. The breakup didn't happen that night. It started months ago with 100 quiet withdrawals. 1,000 unspoken disappointments. All stacking up while you were still trying to prove you were enough. And now, you're angry. Not just at her, but at yourself. For not seeing it. For not holding your line. For giving so much of yourself to someone who was already halfway gone. But you have to understand, it's not about blame. It's about pattern. This will keep happening until you break the pattern. Because the truth is simple and cold. You thought loving her would keep her. But she didn't need love. She needed to feel your strength. Now you sit with the fallout, and it's not just heartbreak. It's the internal corrosion that no one sees. The self-doubt, the lingering humiliation, the voice in your head that asks, why wasn't I enough? It poisons you slowly, especially if you're a man who gave everything. The more you loved, the more it hurts. And here's what stings most: you never even got closure. No real explanation, no apology, no honest conversation. Just cold detachment, vague excuses, and the growing realization that you were dismissed. And that word dismissed, it haunts you, because that's what it felt like. Not a breakup, not a tragic ending, but a quiet, calculated dismissal. She just phased you out, emotionally euthanized you, and it makes you question everything about yourself, your worth, your masculinity, your understanding of women. You start to spiral. You start to think maybe you're too soft. Maybe you care too much. Maybe you're just not made for modern relationships. But let me tell you what really happened. You were emotionally conditioned to serve women, not protect yourself from them. You were trained to perform love, not to embody strength. You thought being a man meant being a provider, a pleaser, a peacekeeper. You thought if you didn't yell, didn't cheat, didn't abandon, then you were automatically valuable. But no one told you that value doesn't come from what you avoid. It comes from what you withstand, what you command, what you won't tolerate. The cost of not understanding this, it's massive. It's not just losing a relationship, it's the erosion of self-trust. The feeling that your instincts failed you, that your emotions were used against you, that your honesty, your devotion, your presence were all seen as weakness. You start to see the worst version of yourself reflected in her indifference. And if you're not careful, you start to believe it. That's how men get broken. Not from pain, from confusion, from gaslighting themselves into thinking they were too much, or not enough, from being told they should open up, only to be left when they do, from being praised for emotional depth, and then discarded the moment they become emotionally invested. It messes with your head. It makes you wary, paranoid, cold, or worse, it makes you repeat the same pattern, thinking the next woman will be different. But she won't. Not until you are. Because this isn't about women. It's about you, your standards, your self-control, your ability to step back, to observe, to resist the urge to overinvest. The real shift happens when you stop trying to prove your value and start living like it's already settled. That's when you change the pattern, because when you stop reacting to her silence, she starts wondering. When you stop chasing her confusion, she starts questioning her decision. When you stop explaining your intentions, defending your emotions, and just stand firm in who you are, she feels that. Not in her mind, but in her body. And respect begins to return, not because you begged, but because you re-established the frame. You're not meant to be emotionally consumed by a woman's approval. You're meant to be centered in your own clarity. But you were never taught that. You were taught to impress her, to keep her, to please her. And now you understand the more you try to keep her, the more you lose her. Because attraction isn't held through effort, it's held through energy. And the most powerful energy a man can hold is emotional detachment without hostility. To be deeply present but never overextended. To care but never collapse. To love but never chase. That's the lesson they never taught you. You don't reclaim your power by becoming cold, bitter, or manipulative. You reclaim it by becoming sovereign, by stepping back into your frame and realizing you were never broken. You just weren't taught how to protect your edge. Women notice early when a man starts leaking his center. And if you don't notice it too, you'll always be behind, always too late, always explaining yourself to a woman who's already checked out. That's what this script is about, ending that delay, training your nervous system to register the shift the moment it starts. Not months later when she's gone, but right then, in real time, so you can respond with strength, not emotion. And when you do, something else happens. She starts to notice you again, not because you chased, but because you didn't, because you held, because you walked, because you had the courage to say, if this is what you're choosing, then I will choose myself. And that moment, that pause, that refusal is what echoes louder than 1,000 words. And now you're here, a little more bitter, a little more aware, but also a little more dangerous in the best way. Because once a man wakes up to this, he doesn't go back to who he was. He can't. The illusion is gone. He sees it clearly now how early the shift begins, how subtle the tests are, how silent the exit can be. He realizes that women don't leave when they're upset. They leave when they've stopped feeling. And the cause of that, it wasn't always what he did wrong. It was what he allowed. He allowed himself to orbit her. He allowed his emotions to be dictated by her moods. He allowed a woman's attention to become his mirror. And once a man does that, he becomes replaceable not because he's weak, but because he forgets what made him powerful in the first place. Here's what most men never learn. Your value is not proven by your devotion. It's revealed by your distance. Not coldness, not cruelty, just presence without attachment. That's the energy women feel in their gut. That's what draws them in. That's what makes them notice you early. Because when a woman meets a man who doesn't flinch at her silence, who doesn't chase after her confusion, who doesn't reward her mixed signals with more affection, it shocks her system. It resets her expectations. It forces her to self-reflect, not because he made her feel guilty, but because he didn't flinch. Most men crumble at the first sign of withdrawal. You send a long text. You ask if she's okay. You start giving her more energy to compensate for what she's withholding. And you don't even realize you just trained her nervous system to believe you'll always adjust to her disconnect. But not anymore. From now on, when she pulls back, you stay still. When she tests your strength, you don't explain it. When she becomes unsure, you remain certain. And if she walks, you don't follow. You don't rage. You don't beg. You don't prove. You just leave the space she walked out of empty. And that silence, that absence, that's what she remembers. Not your apologies, not your flowers, not your emotional pleas. It's the moment she looked back and saw that you never chased. You let her go not because you didn't care, but because you cared more about not losing yourself. That's the shift. That's the power. That's the moment you stop being disposable. Because a man who values himself more than the validation of a woman, he's unshakable. And women feel that early, deeply, and sometimes painfully. But you don't do it to manipulate her. You don't detach to make her beg. You do it because you finally get it. You finally understand that emotional leadership means knowing when to stay and when to walk, and never waiting to be dismissed to decide. You don't wait for her to choose. You don't wait for her to act. You don't try to fix her distance. You notice it, and you respond, not from fear, but from principle. This isn't about turning cold. It's about returning to your core. The version of you that doesn't apologize for having standards, that doesn't confuse kindness with compliance, that doesn't mistake being emotionally available with being emotionally submissive. Now you walk into every connection knowing one thing: you're not here to be chosen, you're here to be met. And if she can't meet you in presence, in consistency, in desire, then you don't try harder, you don't perform, you don't adapt. You withdraw, calmly, cleanly, without commentary. And it's in that quiet exit that your power lives. She'll notice, and maybe she'll realize what she walked away from. Not because you made her feel guilty, but because you didn't try to stop her, because you finally understand something most men never will. She didn't break you. She revealed what you were too afraid to protect.